Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and I'm joined by the great film guru himself, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing pretty good, Michael. Doing pretty good.
And you know what? I'm also doing quite well because we have made it to training camp. There is actual football going on. We got football. We got real football news every single day here until mid-February. It is beautiful. It is a good time to be a football fan. Great time to be a Steelers fan. Of course, we got that extra week to prepare for the Hall of Fame game. We'll get into that a little bit today. But of course, today's theme of the show is basically breaking down training camp and looking at the Steelers' perspective. Over the coming weeks, we will have some guests from some other sites featuring some AFC North teams so we can kind of get prepared for our division and what we have to look out for. But tonight, we'll kick things off with the Steelers. And I'm pretty excited for it. So obviously, camp has just opened up. They just put the pads on as of the day of recording this Wednesday night. Do you have any overall thoughts on training camp this far?
Training camp to me it's mostly just the build up to the preseason, man. I can't wait for the Hall of Fame game. I can't wait to start seeing these guys hit other people in training camp. I mean, you obviously it's nice to know they're getting to it. It's nice to get some reports this year compared to last year of what's going on in training camp. You actually have fans there. You're able to get some like home videos shot from people's cell phones about stuff. But to me, I don't know. It's hard for me to get too excited for training camp and to read too much into it. I listen mostly to what the coaches say, what they're talking about. But it is nice. The nicest thing, I think, in my opinion, is just this training camp like actually happening, right? As opposed to last season where it was who knows what's even going on behind closed doors and how much they're able to do. And they're all separate and you're hearing all these rumors of stuff. This year, at least, we're actually seeing it. So that's very nice.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that. One of the thing I put in the BTSC group chat today, is a picture of Derek Watt with his family, which is something we didn't get last year. Something else I saw before we went on live today was Joe Hayden taking some selfies with fans in the stands, just getting that interaction. Definitely something I didn't realize I missed, but just that aspect of sports is one of the great reasons why you can be a fan and learn a little bit about the athletes and just overall getting to interact with them. It's so much better than I guess hitting the play button on the TV, the power button, I guess I should say, come game day, like actually kind of grow with this team. And we're getting almost a play-by-play report when it comes to training camp. I think even the reporters are a bit antsy to get the information out. And you know what? It's been a lot of fun because it even though I'm on the other side of the continent, it feels like I'm right there in training camp with the amount of video and information that is coming out. So from that sense, it's pretty exciting. Speaking of the Hall of Fame game, well, one of the kind of interesting kind of side notes with it is no team that's ever participated in the Hall of Fame game has actually won a championship. And previous to this, that would mean you played 5 preseason games. Of course, the preseason got chopped down to 3 games, meaning the Steelers are playing the regular 4 games. A big mix of numbers here, but basically, are you happy that this team is in this situation, having to play this game, an extra preseason game on the horizon? Does it mean anything at all?
I like it. I think it's an advantage, especially in this season where they're cutting the training camp. They're cutting the preseason games down 1. The Steelers still get 4. Last year, it was not going. We didn't have a preseason. And so it's nice, and it's really beneficial, especially following the season where we didn't have a preseason, to have that extra preseason game to give guys, that are on the bubble, guys that the Steelers signed a lot of them this year that kind of got lost in the shuffle last year. They brought a lot of guys in for camp. They're going to get to play. They're going to get to play in the preseason. They're going to get that shot to show, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't practice as well as that guy, but I play a game better than him. And that is something I think we really missed last season. I think a lot of guys fell through the cracks and fell off the radar simply because they didn't have those. I know no team has ever won, ever gone to the Super Bowl after playing in the Hall of Fame game. But until 2005, no team had ever been the 6th seed and won the championship either. So it's okay to do it different. You don't have to sit there and play the odds. You can go however you want. It doesn't matter. This could be the first season. Let's do it. Let's be the first team to play in the Hall of Fame game and win the Super Bowl.
So speaking of the preseason, obviously it doesn't matter. The famous 0-16 teams of the Detroit Lions and Cleveland Browns both went 4-0 in the preseason. Seriously, like the stats, like none of that really matters at the end of the day. But for those of us that haven't watched a preseason game in 700 days, I suppose it's what we're going on now. What do we need to look out for in these games? What's important for the fans watching?
Well, first off, preseason games, wins and losses are often decided by players who will not be playing on the team. It's like the fourth quarter is often decides preseason games, and none of those guys are rarely anyone in the fourth quarter going to make an NFL roster or be any kind of impact player. But that's where you find out, do we have players there? And that's the value of the preseason game. You're not looking really at the starters. You're not even looking at veteran backups. Like Tyson Alualu is usually considered a backup. He's not really a starter because he's the nose tackle and he rarely is out there on the first snap. But we know what we're getting from him. Like no one needs to look at Tyson Alualu and say, "Ooh, is he going to be a player this year?" We know what he is. What we're looking for is guys who make a big leap, guys who are making a big second-year leap. We're looking for rookies that come in and are ahead of the curve. We're looking for guys that come out of nowhere to make a play on, to become a special teams player and maybe be something more. And we missed that last season. I would have loved, James Pierre, as good as he played there and the little bit of stretch he got, if there was a preseason last year, maybe he gets more than that. We've had players who come in and start the preseason at the bottom of the roster, and by the end of the preseason, they're like, okay, all right, this dude's our, like number 3 wide, or this guy's our, like number 3 guard or something like that. You're somewhere on that list now, and you're going to get snaps. You're going to get opportunity. So for me, that's what you got to watch for. You got to watch for guys that you don't know about and see what they're doing well. Especially watch if you see someone go off in the Hall of Fame game. Like you see someone you've never heard of have a phenomenal game in the Hall of Fame game. Watch what they do the next game. Watch where they come in. I remember Tuzar Skipper. He was hot in the preseason a couple years ago, and then the Steelers put him in the second quarter. Like he went in when the backups to the starters went in. The legit roster guys went in, and he absolutely disappeared. And then he played later when the other team took out their starters and put in their scrubs, and he started just destroying everybody again. And that's what I was watching. I was like, oh, maybe this guy's not that legit. But so keep an eye on when a person plays, who they're playing against, what they're doing. But really, the preseason is for looking out for those guys. Who's gonna surprise you and maybe be a guy who can be a small minor impact player on this team?
I'm going to answer this next question first. Give you an opportunity to think of your own answer, because I may even steal what you're going to originally think of. But when it comes to this preseason, what I'm most excited for is going to be what the late round draft picks of the 2020 class bring. So not this current draft class, last year's, because we really haven't watched Carlos Davis play a lot. Antoine Brooks Jr., who by all means is killing it in camp thus far and seems to be poised to take a run at that nickel corner spot. Heck, Anthony McFarland didn't play too much a year ago, and what we saw wasn't a great sample size, if we're being honest with ourselves. But when it comes to what I'm really excited for over the next, 5 weeks, it's to see kind of what the Steelers really have from last year's group, as much as it is seeing what they have from this year's group of guys. Like you mentioned with James Pierre, there's just so many question marks surrounding some of these guys that we really haven't watched play, but obviously the Steelers had confidence in bringing them into next season. And, of course, all those draft picks from last year made the team, which is still somewhat of a rarity for the Steelers. Either a 6th or 7th rounder, like going back really the past decade plus, at least one of the guys was getting the axe at some point. Every single one of the guys of the draft class last year made it. Who knows if a lack of preseason had something to do with that, but each and every one of them made it, and we're going to be able to watch them play some real game action this year. So now I'll turn it over to you, Geoffrey. What are you most excited to watch in this preseason?
Well, I honestly, you did steal what would have been my answer.
That's why I went
Antoine
first.
Brooks, but I especially want to mention Carlos Davis, who I again have to admit when they drafted him, I went and looked at his Nebraska film, and it was almost embarrassing what I saw. I was like, this is bad. I'll give the caveat, he was a shot putter, and I was like, he looks like he jumps out of his stance and comes too vertical, and he loses all his leverage when he does that. And I thought at the time, maybe the Steelers think like his shot putting is wrecking his thing and they can fix that. He looked great when he played. He looked like a solid player when he played during the season. I'm very excited to see what he brings. But to answer that separately from just piggybacking on your answer, I'm going to be looking for the guys that are new, the guys that are NFL guys, but lower, like they're not big names. Arthur Millette. Watching his New York Jets film, he looks like a Terrell Austin guy. He fits a lot of roles that players play in this defensive backfield. I think he's a really good signing. He could be a very solid signing for this team. And so while I know Antoine Brooks is listed ahead of him, I honestly, I wonder if that's going to stick. We'll see. I'm going to love that, watching those two play and see how they sort that out. If that's your nickel, if Antoine Brooks can beat him out and be the nickel, I think that says huge things for this team's top 4 cornerbacks, that guy can step up and take it, because Millette is a solid player. He is a very solid dude. He's easily a lot of teams' 5th best. He's their number 5 defensive back on a lot of NFL teams. So that would be very good. Miles Killebrew, who played with Terrell Austin and had an important rotational role as a safety, as a box safety, and doing some different roles in Terrell Austin's defense, including playing some like dime linebacker type of roles. I'm interested in seeing what he's going to do, what he can, if he can revitalize his career. Some of these offensive linemen we signed and brought in, I'm very interested to see what they do. So as we get into the process of the preseason, it's going to be very interesting to see these guys, put themselves on the pecking order with their play and see where they can line up. Because I mean, we know some things about the offensive line. We know some players are going to start. We know what the Steelers want to have happen, but there are always guys who surprise, always guys who step up, guys who aren't quite as good, and that always shapes the roster. And like you said, every rookie made it last year, and maybe a lack of preseason had something to do with it. It could have, because we don't know who might have taken someone's job that just didn't get that chance to take someone's job because they didn't get the preseason. And so that's going to be fun to watch for. And that's who I watch for, is those under covered. Maybe they're not as big a deal signings that we did in the offseason, because 1 or 2 of those are really good players, can be a good, solid rotational player. This team all of a sudden has a lot more depth and a lot more, overall strength to make it through this long season.
Now, before we get back to straight training camp stuff, I do want to back it up, because you brought up Miles Killebrew's name. And one of the things that happened in the past week is the Steelers dropped their first official depth chart. Within it, there's a couple interesting things, but throughout the offseason and after the Steelers signed Miles Killebrew, he's been listed as a linebacker up until the depth chart was released, when he was put back into a safety role. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Terrell Austin was the guy pounding the table in Detroit for them to draft Miles Killebrew. Terrell Austin leaves. They transition him to be more of a dime backer type role. Killebrew was playing a lot as a safety in Detroit under Terrell Austin. Do you see some sort of role potentially where Killebrew could be coming on the field to kind of shift some guys around, allow the other safeties to do perhaps some different things? Could Miles Killebrew really be some sort of maybe secret weapon, underrated guy that we aren't really talking about? Or was this just Terrell Austin getting his guy back from Detroit and just having him for some depth space and special teams play?
When Miles Killebrew was in Detroit, he played everything from dime linebacker to a slot safety, like the dime formation. He's in the slot, but he's playing like a linebacker. He's there to crush people. With Terrell Austin, he is kind of a fit in there. He's an athlete. He can do some man coverage. He is a good tackler. I think he has a chance to be more of a fitting specific roles in specific defensive, alignments and coverage schemes. Which is a thing with Terrell Austin, how he moves people around. I see, that's the thing. I don't know. I look at it, and this is one of the things I'm really excited to see is, does he have something planned for Miles Killebrew? Or is this a guy he was like, you know what, this guy, I think he deserved a better shot than he's got, so let's see if he still can do it. Let's see if he can find, the growth that he should have made as a player, but he wasn't able to, with Terrell Austin leaving that team. I don't know if it's just that kind of a shot and saying, hey, you know what, he's at least a good special teams player, and let's see if he brings us more. But I am very interested to see if Terrell Austin has some interesting designs for him. And of course, I'm saying Terrell Austin, in my head, it has a specific role with the Steelers that's not official. I know Keith Butler is the defensive coordinator, and I've talked to some people who cover the team who are like, I think you're a little crazy. But the coverage schemes and the defense, how we use our secondary has changed immensely since Terrell Austin came on board. And some of the guys we're picking up, they look like players who fit what we're doing now. Whereas before, we would just draft defensive backs and hope they can figure stuff out. Like it was really not, you didn't see a really organized plan there. We draft someone, be like, hopefully you work out in this defense. And now it seems very much more like we're drafting players who play roles and do specific things that we want them to do, that show up in our defensive coverage. So I'm very excited to see how he ends up being used. I can't really say how that's going to be. I can't even predict it, but I expect it would be kind of the nickelback safety role, like the slot corner / safety that they do with a lot of people. It's the Mike Hilton role. They tried it with Minkah Fitzpatrick. They do it a bit with Terrell Edmonds. They've done it with a lot of players, and I expect them to try him there and somewhere, and he's going to fit in.
Yeah, he is a guy that is kind of an interesting question mark. Well, basically everyone the Steelers signed prior to the last 2.5 months, or 2 months really, when it comes to what they're going to bring to this team. So that will be a fun thing to watch. But getting back to training camp itself here, there's been a few names that have really kind of risen to the top when it comes to the best performers. About a week into camp at this point. Of course, we got pads on. Once again today, Alex Highsmith is one of those guys that looks really big. He looks really fast, looks more confident. I see your eyes lighting up when I bring that up. Is there something you want to touch on with Alex Highsmith looking extraordinarily good this far into training camp?
Last season, Alex Highsmith reminded me of Lawrence Timmons and Larry Foote when they were early in their careers. I remember seeing Larry Foote play, and there would be like you would see him like shoot into the backfield on a play, and you're like, oh, he's good, and then he just missed the running back, right? And the running back would go and gain some yards. He was constantly so close to making the play, right? But he wasn't there. He had all kinds of good film, but no results. Lawrence Timmons was the same way. He had stuff where you're sitting there going, oh, wow. Like, look what that guy just did. But there wasn't the results. Like, he wasn't actually getting the job done. He just looked like he was about to do something great, and then it didn't quite work out. He just missed it by a small bit. And eventually, both of those players became guys who made plays. Not like fantastic playmakers. Larry Foote was very solid. But they came around, and you saw how that like look of oh, he's almost there, turned into, wow, okay, the Steelers have a good player here. That's what Alex Highsmith made me think of last year. He was ripping off incredible pass rush moves. He was getting great jumps off the snap. He was doing a lot of things really well. And then at some point, like, it would kind of die off. Like, he didn't quite know how to finish. He had this much of it planned out, and maybe in college that was enough. But after you get that first great move, how do you finish? How do you get the line off, get that move off a little faster so that you cut that angle a little bit smaller, and, tenth of a second, you're there. You're there a tenth of a second faster, and it's a sack instead of a ball thrown away. That's where Alex Highsmith left last season going into this season was just a little bit off from being a playmaker and looking really good and looking like he had a lot of potential. And what we're seeing right now is it looks like a guy who has made that step, and that's a big step to make. If you remember, Lamar Woodley, 2007, had 4 sacks. And go and look what they did in 2008, what him and James Harrison did in 2008. It's a little bit of a difference, little bit of a deal there. I'm thinking you could see that kind of a jump from Alex Highsmith, where he goes from a guy who looked good but didn't produce much to a guy who's on the opposite side of TJ Watt, looks like an absolute stud.
Yeah, that would be huge for this team if Alex Highsmith can step in and turn his production around like that. Yeah, you better watch out. That starting duo of him and TJ Watt would be electric. Mix in Melvin Ingram, who by all reports looks good. According to himself, he feels good. He feels like he's 18 again, apparently. So that is all very exciting. Of course, Alex Highsmith today made some pretty good plays on one-on-ones, on backs, on backers. And, well, speaking of that drill, running back Naji Harris and really all the Steelers rookies have been getting a lot of praise the past week here in training camp. Naji Harris especially, he made a great block in that back-on-backers drill, which kind of got a big reaction of Ben Roethlisberger. Already pictures of them celebrating his block have surfaced. He caught a slant route on 7 shots for a touchdown over Devin Bush. Naji Harris, that is, not Ben Roethlisberger. He threw the ball, but he wasn't the one running the route. But Naji Harris, again, he had a great day at camp. There's some fan video of him busting a big run. The 6,000 strong there at Heinz Field erupted for that. Are you excited for Naji Harris? Because it seems like this guy is ready to go. He's already listed as a starting running back. But this seems like it's a pretty big deal that this guy's so ready to go in every asset of the game.
Yes, this is the big one. I mean, really, it is. It's the first round pick. It's, can we save the running game? And if the running game is all of a sudden good, how much better is the entire offense going to be? So much is riding on Naji Harris that the plays he's making are just getting everyone hyped up, because this isn't just, oh, we have a better running back. This is, our offense could have the piece it needs to be great, right? This offense could be legitimately great. That slant catch he made over Devin Bush, the way people describe it, Devin Bush had him covered, and he sealed off the pass, used his body to get between him and Devin Bush, and secured the catch. That's huge. That's what Juju Smith-Schuster made his rookie season was all about, was those kind of catches. If he can do that to Devin Bush, then he's going to be a real matchup problem. One of the things I've been doing is with my Matt Canada film room, it's called Steelers Offense in Focus, is looking at one of the things I'm talking about right now, and it is the H-back role, which is a hybrid, like, fullback tight end. They can go out in the slot. They're a receiver. They're a blocker. They're sometimes a runner. The guy that best fits that role, if you look at the blocking and pass catching side of it, is Naji Harris. Now, obviously, he's going to be the number one runner. And in any Matt Canada offense that he has ever run, the number one runner is the runner, right? He is your tailback. He's not your H-back. He's not going to go out there and be the receiver. But this is also a team that had Le'Veon Bell. That might change. He may change. He may become that kind of matchup nightmare player that Matt Canada can use to really make this offense, even more than just, hey, the Steelers have a running game now. It could be the Steelers have a running game, and this guy's also like Le'Veon Bell level receiver but with probably a little more speed because Bell wasn't fast. Yeah, that's what we're kind of talking about with Naji Harris. The downside is, and this is one I always look at because I'm a numbers guy too, right? That's in my heart. I'm a numbers guy. When players take a big step up in the number of repetitions they're getting, in the amount of playing time they're getting, the amount of hits they're taking, the amount of training they're doing, you see injuries. Now, the good news is Naji Harris stepped to the NFL and he was in NFL conditioning. They're like, this guy's already, we're not worried about him stepping up to NFL training because he's already been doing that level of training in college. Like, he's that crazy. The question I have is, we're talking about a 17-game season. People are predicting he could break, the rookie rushing records of this team. He could be a serious contributor right off the bat. If you look at the number of touches, the amount of hits he was taking in college, it's not anything like a full NFL schedule where you are the number one guy. So the one concern I have with Naji, and this is what has kept me from being too gushing about him his entire time since we drafted him, is the idea that you don't want to put this guy in there from the start, have him touch the ball 25, 30 times a game, have him taking these hits because he's a dude who invites contact. They talked about that. He did a block. He wasn't satisfied with it. He stayed on and motioned for them to send someone else out. Send it, let's do this again.
Yep.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin loves that. They all love that. They love a guy who invites that kind of contact, who wants to be the big dog in any matchup of two guys hitting. But that's what we have to watch with him. That's the thing that has to just be watched because you don't want to lose him week 13. Right? You don't want it to be the Steelers are on path to being like this juggernaut team heading into the playoffs, and then Naji Harris goes down with an injury. And he's never the same player again or some horrible thing like that. Knock on wood. I hate talking about this. But that's my concern with him is like I am so desperately watching to see any other running back. Any running back on the Steelers. I don't care who they are. I've got no favorites here. Anybody that will put them in a position to say, okay, we can monitor Naji Harris's touches and we can let Anthony McFarland or Benny Snell, I don't care, Jalen Samuels, whoever it is, go out there and run and we'll be okay. And Naji can be reserved a little bit because 17 games is a lot.
Before we flip over to the second half of the show, there is one more name I want to touch on because we've kind of got through two of the kind of darlings of the early portion of training camp in Highsmith and Naji Harris. The third name that has been getting a ton of praise is Pat Freiermuth, the Steelers' second-round pick out of Penn State. Up until today, he's just been a stud receiver. Before they put pads on, he's been catching everything spectacular, one-handed catches. He's dropping two toes in the end zone, maintaining possession of the ball, scoring points. He's been doing it all in the receiving game. Mike Tomlin's been chirping at him saying, we know you can catch, but can you block? And then today they put the pads on, and one of the guys, apparently he's stoned in a drill, is Alex Highsmith, one of the Steelers' darlings at camp. Pat Freiermuth has been answering the bell. It's so much so I had to write a story on it, and that will be dropping for you tomorrow over at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. But Geoffrey, I'm curious your thoughts on Pat Freiermuth and whether or not you expected him to be living so far up to expectation. I guess at this point, he's kind of passing any expectation that we had from the second-round pick of a tight end before we even make it to these preseason games.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, again, in Matt Canada's offense, I'm going to go back to that every time. A lot of times he uses tight ends as your H-back, where you're a blocker. You're doing creatively different things. You're not just in line all the time. You're not just in line or in the slot. You're in the backfield. You're doing all kinds of stuff. Against when Pitt upset Clemson, it was basically their run game was pitches to, it was either James Conner or a little shovel pass to their tight end. Pat Freiermuth, with his pass catching he's showing, if he is a matchup problem, and this is something I will say a lot, matchup problems. If he's a matchup problem as a receiver, and he's also can block, and he can do some creative things, and we're seeing he's a pretty fluid athlete. He's got some good athleticism there. He can be another one of those weapons that is just really hard for defenses to match up with. And that's like when I see them doing these things, I see Pat Freiermuth going off. All I can think of is plays where like you start with like Naji Harris in the backfield and you motion him out to wide receiver, and teams have to account for that because he's actually good and he's a threat out there and he's hard to cover. And then you have like Pat Freiermuth at tight end, and everyone's like, oh crap, okay, now they're cleared out, they're not running the ball, and you get like some little shovel pass to Pat Freiermuth up the middle, where the linebackers had to clear out because they're out there worried about, you know, what's Naji Harris going to bring. The addition of Freiermuth as a weapon would make our two tight end sets really, really dangerous. Allows, if Naji Harris is going to show off versatility, that makes that a bigger deal. I mean, if you can go out there with a two tight end set and say, you know, Eric Ebron's solid blocker. He's apparently convinced that blocking is important now. He saw the light and he's been converted to a blocking tight end. He's at least saying the right things, right? So if he's willing to really buy into being able to block and being a good blocker, and Pat Freiermuth is able to block, and they're both receiving threats, and you've got Harris as your running back, and all of a sudden you just come out like that, and the other team has to counter it, understanding that, okay, we got two tight ends who can block linebackers, right? And we got a running back who can cause us troubles, and then you just go five wide. And you're like, we've got a bunch of tall, fast guys, and we've got a running back who can catch. Like, that's the kind of mismatch nightmares for defenses that would make this Steelers offense, and especially under Matt Canada, incredibly tough to defend because of how Matt Canada uses people creatively. So for me, Pat Freiermuth of his own accord is nice, the hearing that. But when you hear it in conjunction with Naji Harris, in conjunction with Eric Ebron apparently deciding blocking is important, this offense really has that chance. You're seeing the window, like the percentages of maybe this offense could be what we hope it is. The chance that that's actually going to happen is higher than it's been, and it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, you're spot on with all of that, Geoffrey. I'm way more excited for this offense with these reports of how, especially the rookies, how good they've looked. Even Kendrick Green, I know he fumbled a snap today, and then the next play almost shot one over Ben's head, but he caught it. Ben's pretty good at catching wild snaps because honestly, Marquise Pouncey was not a very good at snapping the ball in shotgun. If you look back in his career, there'd be way more fumbles if number 7 wasn't back there behind him catching them all. Ben did a great job of catching those snaps. So I'm not too worried about that with Kendrick Green thus far. I'm sure he'll get all that under control. But as we sit here right now, we do have to transition to the second half of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, just hang tight. If you're listening on a podcast platform, you'll just have to click over to part 2. We're going to cover some cut candidates, whether or not the Steelers can afford to sign another player, perhaps if they can extend TJ Watt in the next couple weeks. And if we have some time, we could get into some position battles. Who is the favorite right now in the early running of this training camp? So flip over right now. Once again, if you're YouTube, Facebook, just hang tight. Alrighty, Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time for the second part of the Curtain Call podcast. I'm Michael Beck. Got to point the right way. He's Geoffrey Benedict, and we're hanging out breaking down training camp today. Yeah, you pointed right the first time. Those of you listening to the audio platform, Geoffrey and I are sitting in Zoom-style boxes, and I pointed the wrong way to begin with. It's okay. It's mirrored. Everything's backward. It's not my fault. I swear. Anyway, back into Steeler stuff. So I don't start getting too sweaty from embarrassment. Where was I going with this? Because now I'm completely thrown off, Geoffrey. I'm kidding. First half of the show, of course, breaking down really kind of the big names at camp so far. The Hall of Fame game, which is coming up in what, a week? Sunday? Is it? Is it already that
A
close?
week. It's a week from tomorrow. It's a Thursday game.
Oh, right. It is a Thursday game. Holy smokes. We are 8 days away from the first, 7 days if you're listening on the podcast side, but 8 days away from actual football. That is crazy to me. And of course, that means the Steelers are already close to that first cut down date, down to 85 is the first cut down. And then at the end of the preseason, of course, they got to get down to 53. So, Geoffrey, I'm going to throw some names out at you. And I want you to tell me whether or not you think they're actually on the chopping block or I'm just full of hot air on this. So the first name I want to throw out to you is Justin Layne. Justin Layne apparently struggled once again at training camp this far. And he struggled since the Steelers made him a third-round pick. I want to say it was 2018 draft class. So Justin Layne, is he on the chopping block?
Absolutely. He is a draft pick. He was drafted. He reminds me of Artie Burns. Like, he was that kind of a player, kind of raw, middling athlete, but he's big, he's strong. He looks like he has potential to grow. That we used to draft at cornerback that never worked. Those are the guys we always drafted, and out of the people who worked, there's like Ike Taylor, and that's it. That's the only one that ever worked out for us. So I think he's just a bad fit because he was drafted for a team and a philosophy in the secondary that we don't use. He was drafted in 28. He was drafted, and then Terrell Austin came on board in 2019, and the defense changed. The secondary changed, how he covers changed, and he does not fit it well. Artie Burns didn't fit it well. He's not going to. And so for me, I think it's just a matter of time. He is done. He probably should not survive to be on the roster this year.
Yeah, in my opinion, he's never looked good. As a third-round pick, you should be a contributor by the end of your rookie year, even for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, typically by the end of the year, you are a contributor in some sense. He was never that. I don't even know if he played a single game as a rookie, or if he did, it was like one game. And then his sophomore year struggled. And then, of course, 2020, he got some playing time, and he looked bad. And he's looked bad again in training camp. So I agree with that one. I think Justin Layne for sure is on the chopping block. Next up, we'll go one at a time, but the Steelers have got to move on from some running backs. There is a lot on this roster. And of course, they have the bell cow now in Naji Harris. The first name I want to throw out is Jaylen Samuels, who right now seems like he's kind of flirting with the bottom of the depth chart.
Yeah, I think he is the odd man out. In my opinion, right now, he's the guy that's gone. We've had this in the back of my head. It's been in the back of my head, that he did well with Matt Canada. But I recently went back and went through his college film and was looking at some of his better plays, and I'm like, there's nothing on here that someone can't do as well as play a real position, right? Jaylen Samuels is that. He was a good playmaker. He's got good instincts in open space. He's when you say an instinctual player, what often we mean is someone who watches film and has trained themselves to react properly, and we call it instinctual. Jaylen Samuels is a truly instinctual player. He's like a playground football guy. He's just so great at the natural stuff. But then you put him in at running back and his footwork is off, right? He's taking extra steps here and he's doing something weird with a cut there. He's not reading the blocking as good as he needs to, and it just doesn't work out. Right, aside from one absolutely fantastic game he gave us against New England, it
150 yards.
Yeah, if you get him in open space as a receiver, he's really valuable. He can make people miss. He can do some things, but he's not really fast. So yeah, you made someone miss, but then the second guy got to you 3 yards later. It's not like you're not that guy. In college, he could be that kind of a playmaker in a Matt Canada offense where they gave him some misdirection, gave him some stuff. But in the NFL, he's not a good enough blocker. He's not a good enough running back. He's not a good enough receiver to really make it work. And so I think he is going to be out.
I agree with you on that one as well. I think Samuels, he disappeared last year for running back field that was already pretty bad to begin with. He was a no-show. I'm surprised he made it to training camp this year, if I'm being 100% honest on that one. The next guy, really, I think it comes down between two players. Of course, Kalen Balaj and Benny Snell Jr. Balaj, apparently, he caught a touchdown as well in that 7 shots drill today, and he's looked pretty good. Basically, it's going to come down between Balaj and Snell. They're kind of built the same. So when it comes to having that kind of body type, perhaps a short yardage type back, even though I'm pretty certain Naji Harris will take those snaps as well. It seems like there's a battle going on between those two guys, but mostly Benny Snell's kind of obviously the bigger name here in Pittsburgh, the higher draft pick. Do you think Snell could be on the chopping block?
I don't think so. I think you're gonna see Snell end up on this team because they do value having another running back who has at least, a good nose for picking up tough yards. If Harris is that guy, they're gonna want Snell too. You don't want to have like guys behind him that don't do that well. Ballage to me is interesting because he actually, I think, could fill that Jalen Samuels role. Right? Kalen Ballage as a pure running back isn't the playmaker. He's a big play runner, but he's also going to lose a lot of yards. Similar to a James Conner, but with a different style and approach to it. If he can, show up and deliver with his receiving, which he's done in the past decently, if he can do that, he could be that running back that you can put out there. He can be a blocker. He can be a runner. He can be a pass receiver kind of guy and have Naji Harris in the backfield. That's, like I said, Naji Harris is like the perfect guy for that versatile role, but you want to have that main threat in the backfield and have another guy that can fill that role on the field at the same time, because then you can really make the best of it. You can look like, oh, Naji Harris is running off left tackle, but he doesn't have the ball. Kalen Ballage got it off a pitch and he's running up the middle. Like that's the kind of role there. I could see Kalen Ballage playing himself onto this team in that kind of a role. I think he is faster, and I think he fits it better than Jalen Samuels does in the NFL. I actually think both those guys. Well, I would say I don't think Benny Snell is in competition with Ballage as much as Ballage is in competition with a guy named Anthony McFarland. I think those two are going to be are in the mix for that H-back second, that running back who also does other things kind of position. That's where I think the competition should end up. We'll see how they do in preseason.
Yeah, I see it a little different because I think Anthony McFarland's more of that like speedy type guy that Matt Canada likes hanging around. That could be like a jet sweep type guy, bounce him around a little bit. So I think that could be a little bit different. As for Benny Snell, though, of course, there was that. It wasn't really a report, more of just people kind of putting 2 and 2 together. Perhaps Benny Snell could be a trade target of the LA Rams after their running back Cam Akers, I believe, is his Achilles he blew out and will miss the 2021 season. Rough, especially for that team. If the Steelers can mine a draft pick out of Benny Snell, I would take that. I would jump all over it. Benny Snell is not going to be a huge contributor with Naji Harris. It comes down to Naji Harris getting injured, which again, knock on wood. If he's healthy all year, Benny Snell's not going to see the field. That's just the way the Steelers are when they have a healthy bell cow running back. So if they can mine a draft pick out of it, I'm all for it. But otherwise, I think he sticks around.
Can I say one more thing on the running backs?
Go for it.
Benny Snell, his rookie year, looked like he had better vision than James Conner and looked like he had better vision than he did in his second season. I don't know what the Steelers were doing, but their running backs lost the ability to read an offensive line and find holes. They have since changed offensive line coaches. I believe the offensive line coach was their run game coordinator, has been for a while. We could see a difference there, but I would put that in there as a possible thing to watch for. Is Benny Snell got worse in his second season with his vision than he was as a rookie, and so they've changed a few coaches, but that's still something I think you have to watch, especially when we're talking about young guys. You don't want to see a Naji Harris suddenly start struggling to find holes So hopefully they have fixed whatever was wrong there. But I want to throw that as a caveat that they had that problem before. Hopefully that is not a problem again.
Yeah, no, you bring up a very good point there. On the other side of the ball, one of the first names that kind of pops up to me, Marcus Allen, who's he's been kind of a cockroach. He just won't go away. No matter what the Steelers try to do to the guy. He was a safety. He's put on a ton of weight to move to linebacker. He's still sticking around. I believe a 2017 draft pick. Year 5 for him now? That's pretty crazy for a guy that has never really done much on the field, even in really a special teams type role. Do you think this is the final stretch for Marcus Allen?
He's definitely got competition.
Did Vince Williams retiring save him a little bit, give him a chance at an extra roster spot?
Yeah, I mean, that frees up spots. My question is, like, Killebrew and Allen, you want both of them? Like, are you keeping two guys, and how are you using them differently? Because they're very similar. They're very similar in the roles they take on the field. So to me, Marcus Allen may be out the door simply because there's other guys that can do that. And you also have to look at a guy like Ulysses Gilbert III. You know, like there's some good competition for that depth linebacker who is more of a coverage guy. So Marcus Allen, that's because he is like that cockroach. I'm not sold on him at all. I'm not a big fan of his, but yeah, he was getting snaps ahead of people. One of our worst defensive games was when it was him and Williamson playing linebacker. Literally everyone else was hurt. Ulysses Gilbert III played that game and was hurt in that game. It was his first game of the season. He got hurt in it. And so it was Marcus Allen and Williamson is in there, and they were just not good. Obviously, it's not that ideal situation. You have your dime backer and a guy who's barely, been on the team. But yeah, Marcus Allen's a tough one for me because I really don't know why they keep him around. He doesn't seem like a very good player to me when I watch him on film, but he's got to be doing
great guy in the
something
locker room.
Yeah, I don't know. He's got to be doing something right that I'm not catching.
I've always known since he was drafted, he was like the hype man in the weight room, keeps the mood light. So I don't know, maybe if you make it to the NFL, kids, you're watching this, just be a good dude. Maybe he'll keep you in the league a couple extra years. Because look at Marcus Allen. Go look at his stats. It'll probably blow your mind how little he's done. But again, year 5, how many people play half a decade in the NFL and do nothing? It's pretty incredible. It is pretty incredible. Good for him. Really, I'm jealous. That's what it comes down to. Good for you, Marcus Allen.
Like Steelers, you should see me in the weight room right
now. I will scream. I will do whatever you want. Just give me a chance, maybe I'm a good scheme fit. Who knows? Just give me a chance.
Give him a chance, man. Give him a chance.
Oh, goodness gracious. Another name that pops up because there's, of course, so many defensive linemen. Someone's got to get cut. Isaiah Buggs. This is the one that I've kind of zoned in on as kind of my kind of leaderboard odds-on favorite to get the axe. What do you think about Isaiah Buggs on the chopping block?
Yeah, that's a pretty good one to pick.
He is above Carlos Davis on the depth chart, but I feel like Davis is a better player.
Davis showed some quickness and a lot of growth as a rookie season. And if you've seen the one training camp video the Steelers came out with, it was Cameron Hayward doing racing sprints with Carlos Davis. And they were basically doing the snap and seeing who off the ball quickest. And they showed Cameron Hayward keeps going up against Carlos Davis because he can't beat him. And they go 4 times before Cameron Hayward finally beats Carlos Davis on this drill. And then he walks over and says something like, I couldn't let you win that. I had to get you once or something like that. But Carlos Davis isn't going to be easy to knock out there. He's not going to be easy to knock out. And he's probably going to get a little bit of an extra chance because he didn't have a training camp last season. So if he's doing well in this training camp, the Steelers are going to be like, okay, you know what? You didn't have time to develop and you did pretty decent. Let's give you a chance. He's more likely to stick around for that. Henry Mondeau is one of those guys that could be on the bubble, but he plays special teams. And also, he was on the field for a good number of sacks. Like, it wasn't him getting them, but people got to the quarterback when he was on the field. Like TJ Watt had like 3 or 4 sacks with Henry Mondeau playing for Stephon Tuitt. He still got to the quarterback. It wasn't like Mondeau was screwing up the defense, you know. So he's got some stuff, and he plays special teams. That's a huge benefit if you're talking bottom of the roster spots. You know, obviously Loudermilk has got to, you got to think he's going to make it. Like, someone has to not make it, and Isaiah Buggs is kind of the one that makes sense. But on the other hand, Isaiah Buggs is a guy who, in bad situations, has stepped up for this team. If you remember the Baltimore game where they were running all over us in the first half, in the second half, Isaiah Buggs just comes out and shuts that down. He just becomes an absolute beast in the middle of the field, looking like Tyson Aluwalu out there. So that is one to watch. I would probably agree with you and lean towards Buggs being the guy who's out. I would probably lean towards that, but man, that's going to be a fight.
Some team is going to pick up a really good defense lineman off the Steelers roster after cuts. That's something the Steelers have got to look for, and something, if we have time, we can get to. But hopefully the Steelers can take advantage of some other team that's loaded a position and add to their roster at the end of camp, because that's what good teams do. They just keep getting better. But someone's going to get a good defender off the Steelers defensive line. The last name that I have written down is Cassius Marsh. One of the more polarizing figures of this offseason that we don't have to worry about being the Steelers' third outside linebacker, well, at least at this moment. But what do you think? Is Marsh, does he have a shot at being the Steelers' fourth outside linebacker, or is he on the chopping block?
Well, he's got his shot. It's just the guy he's got to pass is their draft pick, Quincy Roche, who... Like, you got to think that's got to count for something. He is, was he 6th round?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a 6th round pick, so he's not at all going to get that. You were a high draft pick, so you get through to your second season no matter what. And honestly, if there's a guy who doesn't make it from this class, Roche could be that guy who doesn't make it through the first camp, just because he has some growth. He's a little smaller.
There were people telling me he was an unbelievable outside linebacking prospect that's going to change this defense.
Yeah, I've never quite bought into his hype, because he is a bit smallish to play like he did in college. In college, he was just a brute to deal with. But he's still going to be a tough out. Like, that is a tough guy to take off this roster. Cassius Marsh was a good special teamer who, when they needed him to step up and stop the run, absolutely fell apart and looked like he looked bad. He was just pretty. He looked like Artie Burns out there when he was trying to stop the runs. Yeah. Browns were just like, run at that guy. Like, I think it was something like 70% of their runs were right at Cassius Marsh. They were just like, nope, just run at that dude. He can't stop us, and let's win this game. And that's really where the Steelers' comeback ran out of juice. Was they just started running at Cassius Marsh. Like, Alex Highsmith's not in there. Run at Cassius Marsh, win the game, and they did. It worked. So for me, I would love to see. My preferred result is Quincy Roche shows enough that they move on from Cassius Marsh. But so I'd have to agree he's the most likely candidate. But you still got to take him out.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Any draft pick is still going to be a tough out in that position. It's one to watch for. Before we kind of flip to the last topic of tonight's show, do you have any other names that kind of pop in your mind that could be on the chopping block?
Ooh, I had to...
like there's going to be one quarterback, and it's probably going to be Josh Dobbs. So that one's not all that surprising. But
I'm looking at Ray McLeod. I know we've gone through the big names.
Yeah,
Ray McLeod is one. There's some young guys that could. I mean, kick returner is the least safe job title to have,
especially on the Steelers.
Like the minute, like Stephen Logan was one of the better guys in the NFL, and he was gone. It was one season.
BC Lions legend. Yeah.
So he could be gone. There's some young guys out there that they are going to get a chance with this preseason to win the job. It made sense when they brought him in last season because he had done it in the NFL And without a preseason, you don't know if you can trust these guys just from practice, right? You just seeing what they do in practice, you can't know if you can trust them in a game. So he made sense. He's a good player. I like him. If we stick with him, I'm no problem there. But that's a position that's never really safe. And we should probably bring up Jordan Berry's name.
It wouldn't be a surprise to anyone except for Jeff Hartman, who just swears that Jordan Berry is just kind of like a disease to this fan base, specifically him. So, oh man, yeah. I hope Jordan Berry doesn't watch our shows, because that poor bastard's just been plucked away on all off season long. But I wouldn't be surprised. That's why I didn't throw it out there. I feel like if you polled Steeler fans, it'd be like 99.8% would be picking Presley Harvin to win this battle. Even if it was 50-50 at the end of camp, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, let's go with Presley Harvin because we don't know if he's going to collapse by the end of the year. Even if it was 50-50, they know Jordan Berry crumbles when it gets cold. So I would go with Presley Harvin. So in that idea, unless Harvin looks like crap, which would make no sense to me, it's punting. How does that not transition? Then that's the only way I'd be surprised by any other result.
Yep.
Any other names popping to mind?
No, that would be it. That's it.
Perfect. So the last thought here on tonight's show really comes down to contracts. As a car blazed past my place, sorry for that. Hopefully you didn't hear it. But anyway, thinking about the contracts of this team, specifically the one of TJ Watt, do you think that gets done? They're not talking about it. Like TJ Watt will just shut those questions down right away. Same with Kevin Colbert, Mike. No one's talking about it. Do you think they're working on it? Do you think it gets done in the next couple of weeks?
I would be a little bit surprised at this point. I think we're past the normal window. So to me, I think we're gonna wait till next year. And I think it's because, you're gonna be committing a lot of money to this guy. And if I'm TJ Watt, I'm waiting till next year. Because this year everything's a little bit weird. All the contracts are strange. All the big contracts people are signing are like weirdly allocated to get around this year and the lower salary cap and dump money into later seasons. If I'm TJ Watt, I'm waiting until next season to see where this cap goes, to see where the contracts start heading. Wait to see what the top players who are free agents next year start signing for, and then you could cheat yourself out of a decent chunk of money if all these salaries start going way up. And secondly, the Steelers don't exactly have the whole story of the NFL this year is NFL teams don't have tons of cash sitting around. So to me, if you're the Steelers, how much are you going to give? And with one of the things with contracts this season,
owe you.
yeah. And really, what we're talking about here is if you're going to sign TJ Watt, let's be honest, he's getting the money he wants.
Yeah.
The question is it from you? TJ Watt is going to come in and say, "This is the money I want," and you're either going to give it to him or someone else is. He is that level of a player. He is that big of a name. He's that guy. So I don't know if it even makes sense for the Steelers to sign him this season, other than to try and get him for cheaper. And if you are getting him for cheaper, you look at some of the contracts people are signing this year and how the NFL or how teams are getting over initial contract money by giving them massive guarantees later in the contract. Where they're getting like 2/3 of their contract guaranteed, even some of the smaller, shorter term deals. Steelers don't like doing that. That's not how the Steelers operate. So to me, I don't think it's happening this season. I just think there's too many things against it. And I think a lot of the talk they're doing now is just going to set up a starting point for next season.
I'm going to disagree on you with this one.
Right.
I think it will get done. And to your point where the contract's going up, when it comes to that edge rusher market, I don't see anyone that's on the books that's going to surpass what Myles Garrett and Joey Bosa got. Like Nick Bosa, Joey's younger brother, still a few years away. who else is there? Like Myles Garrett got his payday.
Yep.
TJ Watt is next, and basically what it's going to come down to. He's going to get his $30 million per year. That's what it's going to be. If it's any less, I'd be surprised. If the deal happened a year from now, it's still $30 million a year. I don't think anyone's passing that. He will be the highest paid defensive player in football, and that's just what it's going to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if it got done now, because the Steelers don't want to mess around with having to put a franchise tag on him so they could have an extra window to negotiate with him before, just to get it out of the way. And with the chat with Dave Schofield, the Steelers can work this out. They can give TJ Watt a $45 million signing bonus and not affect the cap this year. So that's what it comes down to. They could give TJ Watt $65 million in a signing bonus, which is just ridiculous. The Steelers would never do. And if they did, I'd be dumbfounded if they put a bonus in like that. But that's when it would start to affect this year's salary cap. So I just really think it will get done, much like Cam Hayward's did, closer to the 11th hour. I think it's just set up pretty easily. Like, all the nickel and diming at this point is going to come down to guarantees, whether or not the Steelers will give it to someone who's a non-quarterback, and term. Like, to me, I feel like this contract would be pretty easy number-wise. It probably comes down 5 years, $150 million, $30 million per, and then just the way they structure it. And that's probably what they're debating right now and trying to figure out to stack the money to make the most amount of sense for both parties. So I think that's the way it will go down. But looking at the clock, we are at the top of the hour here. Geoffrey, before we sign out, is there anything you'd like to plug for the people?
No. I'm gonna go on vacation next week, and NFL Game Pass right now is an absolute hot mess. So my access to footage to do film rooms is not even a thing. Like, it's completely trashed, and they're saying it could be months. I don't know. There's rumors everywhere. So just hope that works out well, because if I don't have film, I can't really do film rooms.
Well, we can always have you on the podcast, and good thing you're starting a podcast on film rooms as well too. That just worked out perfectly as well.
I'll just write controversial articles like Tony does.
Oh no, we're just gonna burn the internet down. That's okay. We've done it before. We can do it again. More the merrier, right?
Absolutely.
As for me, I mentioned it earlier in the show. I'll have an article on Pat Freiermuth and how it's pretty exciting to have a tight end with his skill set coming in. Heck, I feel like I could do a podcast just on the Steelers' lack of ever having an A1 tight end. Like, Heath Miller was the best one in franchise history. I think the Steelers didn't use him enough. But even then, you look back at the history of this team, almost 100 years now, their tight end history is not that good. Pat Freiermuth has the skills, and he's showing that he can be a guy in camp. Maybe they finally have something. So check that out tomorrow. Aside from that, make sure you're checking out the entire BTSC family of podcasts, including Jeff Hartman's Let's Ride, My Live Mike, and Dave Schofield's Stack Geek, which runs in the AM on your podcast-only platform side, being your Spotify's, your Apple Podcasts, what have you, wherever you get your podcast from. And we have some new shows coming as well. There was a State of BTSC article that dropped on the website that breaks down all the shows. So make sure you click over to that to get all the details and all the new hosts, all the new shows. There's a ton of stuff coming to the podcast-only side. So make sure you're checking that out. Because really, if you're watching these shows, we know how much you love the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you're getting even more content there. So make sure you check that out. Aside from that, I hope all of you have a marvelous evening. For my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. We will see you guys soon.